Welcome and thanks for joining. As myself, I'm Annika Borbansky, Managing Director of AOE Consulting, and my co-presenter, Stephen Lewis, who is our Director of Strategy at AOE Consulting, share with you our analyzed report from our recent Accredited Provider Survey, where we delved into the ACCME's new standards for integrity and independence of accredited continuing education. If you responded, we very much appreciate you taking the time to fill out our brief 9-question survey. By way of disclosure, neither myself nor Stephen have any relevant financial relationships to disclose. And just some brief context as to who we are at AOE. This is a snapshot of our team. AOE Consulting is a CME CE accredited consulting services company, and we do employ 8 full-time staff. We also have a few contract staff that we work with in particular areas. We have an advisory board as well as a consulting network. AOE is not a one-size-fits-all consulting company. We bring a breadth of experience, our staff have varied backgrounds, all of which combine in terms of our experience to bring tailored solutions and client success to the partners with which we work. As mentioned, we do have an advisory board. We have folks whose backgrounds are very specific to the accredited CE enterprise. A few former surveyors that are part of our consulting network. In total, over 40 years of combined experience amongst our full-time staff. We do have association management expertise and deliver cost-effective solutions to the groups with which we work.
And one of the reasons we decided to do this survey is that AOE works with multiple clients in different accredited provider categories. From societies to hospitals to medical education and publishing companies and other organizations, universities as well. And we were receiving quite a few questions after the ACCME announced these new standards in December of 2020. And so we decided to deploy this survey to learn a little bit more about the different levels of preparedness for compliance and demonstrating compliance with these new standards, as well as just get general feedback on how the standards were being interpreted.
Briefly, before we jump into the analyzed results, just a quick slide to share with you the areas of AOE's accredited CE consulting services. Really, they can be divided into 4 primary buckets. You may be familiar, AOE does offer deliverables specific to helping organizations become initially accredited with the ACCME and other accreditation boards. We also assist groups with reaccreditation management every 4 to 6 years. We are kind of the next bucket. AOE does offer outsourced compliance management services. So we, in this role, serve as an extension of your team or your staff to provide compliance oversight or to provide day-to-day management of individual activities. The third bucket would be our compliance trainings. We have a few standing trainings that we do offer, but then we do develop a number of customized trainings depending on the educational needs of your staff or your accredited CE program. And then finally, the last bucket would be our association management deliverables and services. So for groups where education is a primary or core to the mission of the society or association, we do work with groups to provide association management deliverables, managing from financial administration to membership growth and retention across accreditation management and meeting management. So a quick background of the ACCME's new standards. As most of you all know, the ACCME did announce the new standards officially in this past December of 2020. Key is that the ACCME is giving organizations a full year to bring their programs into compliance. And so many groups have started this process. but organizations aren't responsible for demonstrating full compliance until January of 2022. The ACCME obviously has announced these updates, but a number of accreditation boards have also adopted these updates, including the ACPE, the Pharmacy Accreditation Board, as well as the ANCC for nursing, among others. So the ACCME's goals in terms of making these updates really centered on the fact that what had been the standards for ensuring independence of accredited continuing education, they wanted to provide some clarifications and streamlining of those standards in a new set of standards, which have been relabeled, renumbered, and those were the overarching goals, is really to assist accredited providers in ensuring and maintaining compliance with their accredited CE programs. As we will get into, and as our survey delved into, these updates to the standards include new terms. There's some expanded timeframes that will impact every accredited program in terms of groups making updates by the January 2022 deadline. AOE, as Stephen mentioned, has fielded a number of questions from accredited providers, which is the reason we decided to launch this survey in January. And so just a bit of background as we get into the analysis of how folks responded.
Just a background on the survey itself. We sent it out to just about 600 accredited providers. We did receive nearly 100 responses, and that's the results that are shared here. We've actually received a little more than 100 responses now, but this is the data from 97 respondents. 82% stated that they were ACCME accredited, but nearly 20%, 18 there, stated that they were jointly accredited for ACCME, ANCC, as well as ACPE. And then other accreditations were also listed there as well. Some had AAFP and others. But we had a very wide mix of all types of accredited organizations, and we'll share with you in the end of this presentation the kind of the different mix of organizations that were represented in this survey. So one of the questions that we asked was really getting to ACCME's goal of demonstrating integrity and independence of accredited education. And so the ACCME did replace the term continuing medical education with accredited continuing education. We asked folks for their level of agreement that term helps, that new term helps demonstrate integrity and independence. And what we found out is that most people either agreed or strongly agreed. We had about a quarter who said that they either disagreed or strongly disagreed with that. But for the majority there, it was agreeing or strongly agreeing. And then there was a good group of people, as we can see in the next slide on the data detail, that said, I don't really agree or disagree. So you can see that over 50% strongly agreed or agreed, about just under a quarter, only 17% disagreed or strongly disagreed. And then we had sort of a mixed bag in the middle there. Then the ACCME, as Annika mentioned, developed new definitions as background. And so they decided to use the term eligible. And eligible organizations are those, no surprise, that are eligible for accreditation. But then they came up with the term ineligible companies. And that's where there's no accreditation eligibility. And basically, the focus here was they wanted to separate those organizations that address or are focused on patient needs compared to those where they have a commercial interest or their primary interest is commercial. Typically, they're talking about pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical funders, grant funders supporting accredited continuing education. Now, there were some language concerns expressed, and they have been since the standards were released, primarily by the commercial interests. To be termed ineligible, it doesn't sound like they're really invited to be a part of a accredited continuing education enterprise that they gladly support because they want to get the most accurate information and education out regarding the products and services that they're providing, so that physicians are well up to speed, as well as nurses and others. The next question was regarding ineligible companies, and it basically states that accredited providers are no longer allowed to share learner contact information with those ineligible companies without obtaining explicit consent of the individual learner. So we asked folks to rate the level of impact those changes will have on their program. As you can see, the majority said low or no impact, but there still were a significant number that said moderate to significant impact. And so again, in the data detail, you can see that still a little over a quarter said they're going to have some moderate to significant impact there, but the vast majority, just under 3/4, said no or low impact there. The next standard is basically showing that most folks are saying there's very little impact regarding the standard 2 that prohibits faculty from actively promoting products or services that serve their financial interests. And so most people concluded there that whether it's consulting services, books, software, products, anything, there's going to be probably little impact. Again, a small number of folks said moderate to significant impact, but the vast majority said that's going to cause low impact or no impact to their accredited continuing education program.
Standard 3.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Standard 3 delves into the new term mitigate, instead of resolving conflicts of interest, mitigating financial relationships related to individuals who have control or influence over accredited CE content, and specific any financial relationships they have with ineligible companies, which includes pharmaceutical, medical device, biotech companies. Two key updates with Standard 3 as compared to how providers have previously managed financial relationships. First is the time frame. So whereas previously providers would collect disclosure information from individuals for the past 12 months, the ACCMEs has updated this time frame to 24 months. Second key area of note is that as opposed to collecting what a individual deems relevant to a specific accredited CE program, the ACCME is now requiring organizations to collect all financial relationships that an individual may have with an ineligible company. And so we've received a lot of questions in this area. A lot of concerns in this area have been expressed to our consultants just in terms of how an organization might possibly manage this. It does put full responsibility of determining what's relevant with the provider. And so providers, if they didn't previously have a process for determining relevance, with each activity, do now need to implement process for doing that. And so you'll be working through everything that's been disclosed to determine, specific to an accredited program, whether or not the disclosure is related to the products or services of a particular ineligible company as it relates to the content of an accredited CE program. You can see here that a good number of folks do have expressed some potential concern with how to demonstrate compliance. If you look at the data detail, just under half of folks expressed a mixed to understanding as to how they'll demonstrate compliance to outright just not understanding how they'll demonstrate compliance. In terms of feedback that we received, people who just emailed following up to the survey, because we didn't have free text comments as part of this survey, lots of questions just in terms of how to manage this. If you're not a content expert, or what a process might look like. And so that's again, if an organization didn't have a process for determining relevance, that'll be something needing to be worked out. And does typically require some dedicated time and research, specific to companies. if you're trying to figure out whether or not they meet the definition of ineligibility and what the relationship to the content is. Standard 5, then we asked a question related to non-accredited education and asked folks to rate the level of impact that this particular standard and the changes it brings about will have on specific accredited CE programs and the planning of accredited CE activities. So Standard 5 is where the ACCME does make explicit that when it comes to non-accredited education, be it promotional education or not, just education that may not carry accreditation, that there must be a 30-minute buffer that occurs before or after you then launch into accredited continuing education with any CE activity. So we asked folks to rate the level of impact, and as you can see, lots of folks reporting that there will be at least some impact. Just over 70% of folks, if we go to the data detail, indicated either low impact to significant impact regarding changes that may need to be made. This update does require that folks take time during the planning process to determine, with their schedules, particularly in the live setting, what the schedule is going to look like in terms of activities or content that may be accredited versus that's not. I think providers well understand that anything that's promotional, needs to have a separate space placed in place, but just education that may not carry accreditation, like a panel discussion that just doesn't carry accreditation or something of that nature, now is part of this consideration when planning. Finally, AOE asked just a general question of providers who were responding to this survey so that we could get a general sense as to how folks are feeling overall related to their level of preparedness in demonstrating compliance with these new standards. Again, you have until January of 2022 to demonstrate compliance, but you can see that almost half of folks feel like they are somewhat to very unprepared, but then it's pretty well split. Some folks feel like they're in good shape with maybe just a few tweaks or modifications to maybe a disclosure form, that sort of thing. But you can see here that it is a good number of folks who feel like there is some focused time that they're going to need to put in order to make changes and bring their programs into full compliance.
And it makes sense that only a very small number of folks, 6%, are saying I'm prepared now, and that's why the ACCME is giving folks time to bring their programs up to speed. But it is interesting to note that there will need to be some more analysis done by all accredited providers, because with those numbers that from this survey showing that that either they don't feel like they're ready, or they don't know whether they're prepared, or they're partially prepared. Obviously, a little bit of work needs to be done in the detail areas to make sure that people have processes, procedures in place, and are implementing them prior to that timeline for implementation of next year.
And as Stephen mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, this is a quick snapshot of who all responded to AOE's survey. You can see that, physician membership organizations and schools of medicine were tied for being our primary cohort of respondents, followed closely by hospitals or healthcare delivery systems and publishing or education companies. But I think it's worthwhile to note that we did hear from at least one representative of all accredited provider types. And to just to round out this presentation, AOE, just in terms of our mission, and one of the reasons that we engage in drilling in and understanding, where providers are at, given we work with providers across various types, is that we truly do aim to be kind of that life buoy that supports the success of the organizations with which we work. There's a couple or few key areas where we feel like, AOE is unique as an accredited CE consulting and services company. One of those areas has to do with our consulting approach. We do spend a good amount of time investing in clients and potential clients on the front end to understand process and corporate culture, that sort of thing. Our consulting approach is very tailored and personalized based on identified need. We talked earlier about the fact that in addition to our full-time staff, we do have an advisory board and a consulting network where we have access to experts with various backgrounds. And then, our consulting approach does involve a very streamlined process for communicating with clients across the various things that we may be doing for them. Kind of the second area that we think makes AOE unique is just our intelligence, our organizational intelligence. Because we work across provider types and across really accredited CE stakeholders, because we do provide regular and routine compliance trainings to funders, we have been able to collect a number of best practices that we're able to share with organizations. We have a tenured staff who, as I mentioned, have diverse backgrounds. Some are more regulatory, some are more specifically grounded in accredited CE compliance. We have folks that have adult education backgrounds, others with more specific science and kind of biostatistic backgrounds, but all of that combines to advance AOE's experience on behalf of our clients. I think one of the other key things is that AOE has a defined set of processes, and while we have a tailored approach to consulting, we do have a systematic approach to how we work with groups. And then finally, our commitment to clients, but as well the accredited CE space. Our client relationships are paramount, and we have a number of groups that we have worked with for a number of years on an annual basis. We really are and truly about excellence. That is what we aim for, and always when we can, aiming to exceed expectations. And core to what we believe in as an organization is that we invest in the CE enterprise. And I think that this survey and sharing the results with you all is an example of that. So thank you for joining us, and we welcome any questions, if you have any, and hope that this information is enlightening or useful in some way.